Hey, Tolerators, it's me, Natalie, with your before show updates on all things Team Tolerator. So, we are sitting on the January, February, March side of life. And what does that look like? Well, it looks like the misogyny meltdown over on Patreon is well underway. That is a new series and show that I am producing for Patreon members only because there is a lot of scripting and a lot of vulnerability going on. I've already sang a song, I've already produced a skit, I'm already writing comedy. So go take a chance on the misogyny meltdown and the way that To All the Men I've Tolerated Before is expanding and evolving with the link in the show notes. For January, we celebrated the Misogynist of the Year award ceremony. For February, we are focusing on the concept of love and self love being part of the resistance. And in March, why, yes, we're still going to do seasonal things with celebrating International Women's Month. And all of that will be wrapped up into our new variety show, Misogyny Meltdown. I cannot wait for you to check it out. This is To All the Men I've Tolerated Before with Anthony Katona, your weekly look at everyday misogyny. Today we have Whitney on the show. Whitney works in the gaming industry, and I'm going to be very quick on the intro, which is very unlike me, because we're getting into a very specific story of everyday misogyny surrounding that topic. So, Whitney, thank you for being here, and thanks for wanting to share a story with me and the listeners.
Thank you so much for having me. I remember we discussed, being on the show and quite a while ago, and I just didn't feel I had anything really to add until I had this kind of experience in conversation, and I immediately knew, oh, this is going to be perfect for the show.
Exactly. Also, I just loved the blatant honesty where you were like, I understand where you're coming from with this pitch. I cannot think of one thing. It's amazing because people will tell me all the time, like, oh, you should reach out to this person. They work as a woman in engineering. There's no way they've never been harassed at work. And then someone has to text me and be like, well, it does turn out that I have yet to be harassed at work. And I'm like, good for you. All right.
I do think things are starting to change, but obviously there's a long way to go for us to have, an equal seat at the table.
And then I think also I live in this beautiful rosy bubble right up until I go home for something like a holiday where it's like I'm following women in tech, women in STEM, women who are leading the charge in the TTRPG community, our trans and non-binary community who are leading comedy and gaming and all of that. And I'm like, it's getting better. The tides are turning. I'm going to Google femme-owned companies to work for, and then Google will be like, you really love that Instagram though, don't you, girl? Because it's not always reality.
Right. You're like, wait, oh, there's not that many.
TikTok made me believe that I would have had an easier job doing this or an easier time doing this. But go ahead and give us whatever you're comfortable with about sharing about your current position so we get a little bit of a baseline of this story.
Yeah, so I've worked in the video game industry and, oh my goodness, probably for a total of 8 years. And my role is in marketing. I think being in marketing does contribute to working with a lot of women. There's more women on my direct team than there are men. So I think in my direct team, there's rarely, misogyny or patriarchy that's running everything. We're very listened to. I have women bosses, and that being said, the company itself is not always that way. That's going to be very different across different teams especially when you get into people that are actually making the games, the game developers as well. But I love working in the industry. I'm a huge video game fan and have been since I was a kid. I always say I started playing on an Atari 800 XL. That was a retro game when I started playing it. I'm not like 85, but my parents had one. And so I've always been obsessed with games and always feel like I've had to prove myself as a gamer. There's that prove yourself mentality of like, oh, you're not a real gamer because you play Candy Crush, or oh, you're not a real gamer because you just play Animal Crossing. That's not real gaming. And that I do think has started to shift. And there's I love what people are calling wholesome games and cozy gaming, and just this world where you don't have to be stressed playing video games. And I love being stressed playing video games. I play a lot of hard games, and then I play a lot of puzzle games, and then I play Disney's Dreamlight Valley.
Well, and I would, because I'm always on TikTok, so there was a woman who basically gives you the rundown of these cozy, stress-free games. And she said that cozy, stress-free games and she's one of the many ones that I follow. And
yes,
she's like,
I probably follow her
yeah,
too.
honestly. And she was like, so I don't know if you ran into this, but she had an article or she was getting backlash in her comments where it's like, will women like playing these cozy games because they just want to be in charge of everything in it? So, like, you're in charge of your little Animal Crossing critters. You're in charge of your farm on Stardew Valley. You're the person drowning your husband in the pool of the original Sims, which I was a person who got rid of a husband quickly by drowning him in a pool. But, and she was like, well, first off, she made a joke about all of the ways that women used to do horrific things on Sims and create horrific scenarios for themselves, which I was one. But it got me thinking, and I was like, well, do you ever think that my little farm on Stardew Valley is the only chance I have to, like, have my own hand in how much money I'm making, who I actually get to date, what my sexuality is? And there's like, and no one on Stardew's giving me sass for it. Like, I just get to be the little person running my farm. And as soon as I look up from Stardew Valley, I have to deal with people catcalling me at Meijer and making me feel unsafe at my own grocery store. So it's one of those things where it's like, I really think you thought you had a point, but I, because I'm magical, can link that directly back to everyday misogyny.
And you can also flip the table in reverse and say, what does it say about you that all you want to do is play Call of Duty and shoot and kill somebody? Is that better than us just wanting to live on a farm and take care of our crops?
Right. Also that, like, I don't think that women's inclination to love their Animal Crossing island is at all affecting whether or not elementary schools are safe, you know? It's just one of those things.
Yeah, the repercussions. And that's also to say, and I'm very aware that there's a ton of men who love Animal Crossing, Harvest Moon, Stardew Valley, as well as women who love shooters. I'm not good at first person shooters, so it's not my personal cup of tea, mostly because I get nauseous with first person games in general, and my aim is terrible. But I play a ton of Dark Souls, which is known as a relatively difficult game and like very hard, and a lot of people won't even touch it because they say it's too hard. So again, there's this wave of gaming that just because you like cozy games, it doesn't mean that you're not good at games or anything like that. You don't have to. Games aren't always just about being the best. I see a lot of people talk about video games now becoming an art medium, and they trash a lot of games that are called quote unquote walking simulators, where you really aren't impacting or making a storyline or winning or beating a boss, but you're experiencing art at the end of the day, experiencing a story in a different kind of medium. And it turns into our video games art. And that's what I do love about video games, and what I love about working in the industry is there's so many different types of games, and it's a platform where so many people can tell different stories. And gatekeeping and saying that women don't play video games, or they don't play the video games that you're interested in, doesn't mean that there's not a space for us in this industry, and as fans and people that work in it.
Right. I was under the assumption that we bought video games because there are tens of dozens of people who sit there and make sure that they're pretty. Like, I thought that that was a whole job and a whole department at the at the video game company, which I know that it is. So for you to be like, people are like pushing back against the like artistic nuance gaming, and all I could think about was, oh, I really loved that. Oh, it has soul in it. And it was a beautiful indie game right when indie Switch games were becoming like the thing. And you're just like a little person with a boat collecting animals who represent
Spiritfarer.
Spiritfarer. Yes.
Yes. As soon as you said a boat, I was like, I know what you're talking about.
And my sister and I loved it, and we cried the entire time, and it made me think of all of my family members who had passed. And I need to put it back on my Switch because I know that they've added more souls that I could go back and collect. Mm-hmm. But and I love that you brought up the motion sickness thing, because I will spend upwards to $80 on a game where I know I would really love the story, and I can maybe play it for 20 minutes at a time. And if I push to like 30, then it's like, oh, you're going to throw up later today. Like, I'm a car sick kid.
Yeah. And another industry that I'm a big fan of is horror. And I would love to play more horror video games, but the medium, which 100% makes sense, is the scariest is when it's happening to you, is first person horror. Because, you're seeing it through the lens. You're not controlling a character. You don't have that like dissociation of like, oh, my full character's on screen. This isn't happening to me. It's happening to them. When you put it into first person, it's so much scarier. But there's so many games that I just can't play in horror because I just freak out, or get nauseous. I get a headache. I can't do VR. I can't. There's so many mediums that I just can't enjoy, which is a bummer. But you can always watch someone play the game. That's a whole
other thing.
That's a whole thing.
But I recently found out through another one of our former guests, Curvin, who came on to talk about creating games in the board game industry, where inclusivity is like at the forefront of your mind the entire time. And I was watching a video, and he said that he or someone in his comments that he was responding to said that motion sickness during games in a large part affects more women than it does men. And it's because no one ever play tests the game to see how women react to those kind of stimuli. And it's the same with driving a car. Like, no one ever is like, should we have a lady sit in this car and make sure that all of the blind spots make sense? It's always just like, I don't know, some guy named George tested this. You should love it.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's where it comes into people, and it's getting better, but accessibility in gaming, just font options are like the bare minimum that you can do. The amount of times I put a video game on, I'm like, I can't even read this. Like, I would like the font to be older. My favorite TikTok is when someone uses the "It Is Time" Lion King, and it's the millennial gamers having to up their font size because they can't see it anymore. And I'm like, yep, I feel that now in my mid-30s. But accessibility has really been making strides, but it's not always a lot of companies like first thought. Just from puzzle games that are based on color, the amount of colorblind people that can't play your game it's really like, that's just a barrier. I know the mobile game Two Dots, which I used to play, has a colorblind mode, which is based on patterns, so that if you do have color deficiency, you can still play your game. And so I wonder how many. I know that there are men on accessibility teams, but I feel like there's a lot of there's an empathy in in being like, yes, this video game suits all of my needs, but what about other people? What about, like, there are blind video gamers that are legally blind that can play video games, but with a lot of help. I know there's a creator, Steve Sayer, who he goes by the Blind Gamer. Deaf Gamers, another content creator that is deaf and shows, what games that they can play. You know, just award shows and video game showcases having subtitles is so important for people so that they can watch even if they can't hear. We can't like act like these people don't get to enjoy sources of media just because they're deaf or blind. Like they can still watch or enjoy film and cinema and music in just different ways, and you got to have people in companies that think about that.
You really do. And I think you're right. Like, you can't solve a problem until you name a problem. And the first step is always naming. And I feel now in the awareness stage, it's easy to just be like hot and mad and be like, why hasn't anyone thought about this? And it's like, well, I also hadn't thought about this until I watched a 45-second TikTok. Like, so we can't be thinking of all things at all times, but it's the empathy part and just being open to hearing someone go, when you created your game, did you consider this? And if you say no, you say no, because there's a path forward there to be like, okay, so now that we've named it, what can we consider moving forward? Let's go ahead and get into the specific story. Set the scene, set the main characters for us.
Now you know my video game history from my Atari 800 XL days.
No one has to flood the comments with, who even is she? And did she play Sims Magic?
I've played my World of Warcraft. I played Dark Souls. Don't worry about it. So, one of my best friends invited me over to a park hangout, and I walked over, and she mentioned that she had a friend, and we'll just name him Alex, and that Alex, she tells people, oh, my friend Whitney's coming, you haven't met her. Whitney, and she tells Alex, Whitney works in video games, knowing that Alex likes playing video games. And so, there's this little connection that you two can talk to each other. And I'm like, great, cool. I love talking about video games. And I get there, and legitimately before I'm able to sit down on the blanket, Alex is asking me, oh, I heard you worked at this company. What can you tell me about the next I think he said Mass Effect? And I was just like, I said I don't know. I don't. And he was like, well, your company makes it. And I said, no, I think I would know. In my brain, I'm like, I think I would know if the company I work for made Mass Effect, because I've played all of them. It's one of my favorite series. I have a stuffed Elcor, which is this adorable alien from the series. And I just was like, okay, well, that's where the conversation will end. And he continued to push and say, no. You make your company makes Mass Effect. And I looked at him and they said, no, I think I would know. I love Mass Effect. I'm excited for a new Mass Effect, but my company doesn't make that. Again, this is where the conversation should end, and it didn't. And there was part of me that was like, I'm going to whip my phone out and Google it and show this guy. I was like, Mass Effect is made by EA and BioWare. Like, I don't work for either of those companies. And he was just like, no, you made one of them. Like, no, we did not. They've all been made by the same person. Like, what is this conversation? I legitimately was looking around at people to be like, are you hearing this? Do you hear what is happening around here? And everyone else is like, my friend Kylie's hearing it. And And I just remember, yeah, I said I wanted to whip out my phone, but at the same time, like, that makes you kind of turn into this, like, I told you so kind of, mentality of like, oh, I have to prove that he's wrong, even though I know I'm right, that this person is telling me that I'm wrong about a company that I work for and have worked for at this point for 3 years. Like, I think I would know what video games we made. And I don't even know every video game we've made. To be honest, we've made a ton, but I know about my favorite game series that we did not make it.
Well, and I'm assuming that even if you hadn't personally worked on the project to market the new game or whatever, you would have known a person. It would have come up in like an all staff meeting or something. Like,
I would have known what games we made. Yeah, even if it wasn't the game that I've made or my favorite game, but the fact of the matter is I love this series and I know we did not make it because I know I don't work at either of those companies. And so, that was kind of the end of that. And my first impression of this is, oh, this guy's such a douche. Like, ugh, this is so awful. And then, subsequent kind of hangouts, I always had that bitter taste in my mouth that this guy, um, thought he was right. So there was another hangout where there was like, just kind of minor bickering and jabs. And after the second time I saw him, I was talking to my best friend and she mentioned that he realized he was wrong and he talked to her about it, but had not yet talked to me. And I was like, oh, well, he had that whole chance when we were playing board games that he could have said something, and he chose not to. So then the third time, we're all at a hangout. Hours go by. I know this man has mentioned that he's wrong to my best friend and has yet to speak to me about it. And drinks were involved, weed was involved, and at some point it got to a head where he was telling me like that I was, having really strong opinions about something, and which I do. Obviously, I'm allowed to have strong opinions about things that I know, which is horror movies and video games. And I kind of just called him out in front of a group of people about how I felt like I was owed an apology, knowing that, he talked to his friend about it, but didn't even choose to think that he should talk to me about it. And it is personal. It is a personal attack because it is a representation of what I and other women and other people of just marginalized or underrepresented marginalized group, not underrepresented or marginalized groups have to deal with in a male dominated industry. And it's just a small conversation that is so triggering. It is triggering of the times where I've had to prove what video games I played at GameStop, or when I was live streaming on Twitch, how people were like, oh, you're not a real gamer, or oh, what's your cred, or oh, you're not good at this game, you must suck at all games. And it's just this small representation of this man admitted to me that there was no way that he could be wrong and could not listen to the woman that was in front of him, that worked at the company, that had the knowledge that we did not make this game. And he listened and he apologized, and we even later discussed it at a later date that, yes, I would have liked to have pulled him aside and had that conversation, but he also understood where I was coming from and said, me apologizing to you is the bare minimum that I could do. And now we're friends, and I just saw him and I gave him a hug and I gave him a code for a video game that just launched, and he's been like, hey, you ever need a shelf hung? Let me know. And I was like, absolutely, you got it. So luckily there was a 180, especially because he is a close friend of my best friends. He's going to be around, and I was glad we could get there. And now we can talk about video games, and now we can even make fun of it, where it's like, you need to believe me when I say this, Alex.
I For me, it's when you tell me this story, it's that Tangled song that runs through my head where it's like mother knows best, but it's always like man knows best. Man is right. And we run into that in so many instances. And one of the great ways that I come into contact with that is the medical field. Like some man will just listen to your list of symptoms and go, I think it's this. And then if you go, well, I'd like a second opinion, or I was also looking into this, then you're made to feel like foolish or anxious or stupid because you've looked into something or you have knowledge that they weren't expecting to volley back. And for me, it's also like I also cognitively and logically understand that you said something, it was incorrect. That's a vulnerable moment for you. But it's the constant doubling down for
Right.
me. It's like,
So many times.
right, because it was a quadruple down. It was like, no, 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 we're not moving on until you realize that without you even knowing, without your knowing consent, you worked on this game that I want to talk about. Like,
And the sad thing is, we could have talked about Mass Effect. I love that series so much. And we couldn't because he was convinced the company I worked for made it. And I was just like, we didn't make this game. I specifically try to work at a company I try to work on game titles of games I don't want to play because it's like seeing how the beef gets made. You know, it's like at the end of the day, I'm traumatized by what I've had to go through for 8 months to work on this game that I can't go enjoy the game. So it's like, oh, I want to play a game. Don't put me on that title. I just
exactly. Again, back to this idea that like man is right, and I don't know why you're arguing. I like logically and cognitively, I also understand that it's an anxiety response from them because I've seen it in real time where someone says something and you have to tell the man in the room that, you know, me and my friends always joke about like, if a man learned something when he was 7 years old, it forever has to be true. And if you're the woman who, when he's 35, goes, but have you ever considered that we have new knowledge and it's this? Well, then it's like you've knocked down their entire like religion and foundation on life. And then you are dealing with a grown person throwing a tantrum. And it's happened to me in real time where I'm like, I didn't even know if the thing I said was entirely true. I just said, well, didn't a documentary kind of explore this option? Hoping to get like you were in that video game discussion, hoping to like get to know you, engage in conversation. Like, wouldn't it be something if we had like a philosophical debate about this or someone? I feel like we are in this really dangerous zone on the timeline where like no one wants to hear new information because we always have new information. And therefore, if you're sitting with people who you may or may not like and you go, well, I hear that you know, Tay Tay's sport boy boyfriend's brother is retiring and he has at some point decided to not retire and TikTok didn't alert me or Swifty didn't text me about it. And like, and you tell me, well, he didn't retire. Actually, he rescinded it. And I could be like, oh, cool. Can't wait to see if that old man survives playing football. Instead of just like flipping a table and being like, Taylor Swift would have told me herself if he decided to take back his retirement.
we can take on information because, like you said, there's new things happening every day and we can't be up to date on every single thing. And so things are changing and what we know is constantly changing and what may be true yesterday is not true today. And that's where the news, you know, has a responsibility a lot of the times to not report until they have a full story, it feels like, you know. But that's, again, a whole other topic. But you're right, you know, this belief that he held, and he admitted it to himself that there was no possible way in his mind that he could have been wrong. And it's wild to me because it's okay to be wrong. There's nothing wrong with being wrong. Is that a t-shirt? You know, like, it's okay to change your mind on the new information that you provide. You know, it's a mistake. It's such a small thing that could have gone a completely different direction had he not. And I probably never would have like brought this up to him had I not known that he talked to my friend about it. That was where I was like, oh, so he knew he was wrong. It still has not like brought it up to me. And, you know, I talked to people that were like, well, why do you think you deserve an apology? And I'm like, because I do. Because I'm the expert in the room. I'm not the expert on everything, but I am a worker in the industry. You are a fan. You are a gamer. You don't see the behind the scenes that I see. You don't have the knowledge that I do about why video games do the things that they do, why video games come out with the way that they come out. And sometimes I don't even know why they do that, okay? Because again, at the top of the level, there's probably a man making a decision that I don't agree with. And I'm like, I don't want to make those decisions, but I also don't agree with the decisions that XYZ are making. It comes to the fact that we don't have an equal seat at the table a lot of the times. And that's just in that industry. I do have to work harder. I do have to prove myself more. There's a reason at my company, my bosses have said, if you realize that you're the only woman in a meeting, invite one of us in so that it just doesn't feel like, and that, again, this doesn't happen a ton for my team because marketing does, I think, heavily lean women, at least on my teams. But they said that, and there's a reason that they said that at the end of the day. That's based in experience.
Well, and part of me also, when you say that he went to your friend first and was like, hey, I made a big Ron, part of me is wondering if, like, and not that I would ever project this on anyone, but my gut reaction as a person who looks at misogyny all day, every day, and will come up with wild theories because of it, went, oh, you wanted my friend to do all of the emotional labor to make you feel more comfortable when we're hanging out in groups. So you wanted my friend to come up to me and be like, he's really sorry, though. Can you start smiling at him more? Or whatever it was going to take to make you more comfortable. And it's a way that men in my life in the past have just like bucked it to me. Like, well, can you please disappoint our family members because I don't feel like doing that? And it's like, no.
Can you tell her I'm sorry? Like, that's not what he said, but at the end of the day, it's like, oh, can you tell her she knew I was wrong? And again, I appreciate that Alex let me kind of go off on him. I was shaking. I was on the verge of tears because it's not safe to tell somebody that what they said to you hurt them. That's vulnerable for me, and I don't know how he's going to react. And again, the setting, it just kind of blew to a head where there's like 5 other people just kind of sitting there like on their phone, like sipping tea, watching what's happening, including his girlfriend. I don't think I needed to apologize to him about how it went down, but I just said I wish that I had taken you aside so we could have had this conversation. And, you know, his response was, again, he's like, no, I think it went exactly the way that it needed to. And me apologizing is the bare minimum that I could do. And he's like, I know, like, I've dated women that work in the industry. I should have known that this is hard. Like, harder for you than a guy that works in the industry. And so again, I think his allowance, his accepting of the space and accepting of me getting emotional and getting upset and saying what I said, and you know, having the conversation afterwards that now we're on good terms, it's happened, and you know, we've moved forward, has allowed us to have a friendship, but that could have gone so many different ways along the way. And I'm glad it worked out the way it did.
Okay, so I'm just going to clarify the timeline of the story real quick. During the apology meeting and like the we're with friends, he says something, you have a reaction, and then he realizes he's wrong, and you wish that you had like taken him aside before you had your shaking, you know, tear reaction. which is also how I process all of my feelings, which I think is another way that they use our reactions. Like, not him, but like, one of the tools of misogyny and the patriarchy is to believe that if I am reacting, it means that I'm in the wrong. Like, if I'm shaking like I'm upset and crying like I'm upset or whatever, it's like, told you. You're overreacting. I get to be right.
100%.
Why would you be crying if you were in the right? And so, what did he bring it up first? Was he like, hey, because you said that he was like kind of digging at you about having hard opinion or strong opinions about something?
Yeah, yeah. We were talking about like horror movies, and it just kind of was like it was like an elephant in a room that I had to call out and said, like, I think you owe me an apology, and it expressed like, and he was like, yeah, I was wrong, and I was like, but like, you didn't say that to me, and you didn't come and apologize to me, and like, he's like, you haven't given me a chance, and I'm like, we've been hanging out here for 4 hours, and you haven't come up to me, and I sat next to you on the couch at board game night, and you didn't come up to me. Like, there are ample opportunities, my dude. Like, at the end of the day, I'm sitting here asking for an apology because you haven't taken the opportunity to initiate it yourself.
And again, it's that transfer of emotional labor. So you're going to have me sit an arm's length away from you for 4 hours. And then at the end of the day, it's still on me to go, hey, Alex, have you ever thought about the definition of the word sorry or I'm wrong or anything and how it might relate to me right now and whether or not I appreciate you as a person in my life? And again, they do. They just like, it's that idea of if she wants an apology, she'll ask for one. If she wants help, she'll ask for one. For some, it's that weaponized incompetence that they volley back at us. And it's like, so I'm wrong for reacting. I'm also wrong for asking. I'm also wrong for not asking. And you tried to give it like it. And again, Alex probably has no idea that this is something that is a pattern that happens in a lot of female male relationships where it's like I'm constantly giving you kindergarten prompts on how to behave like a human, like
Right.
on the emotional intelligence scale.
Yeah, there's so many opportunities that could have happened, and it could have never happened at the beginning if he had just listened to the expert. And I just think men don't like to listen to women that know more than them. And it's not that we know more than them on every single thing. I know nothing about tabletop role playing games. So if you told me something that was against a belief that I had, I'm not going to sit here and say, Natalie, no, that is so wrong. And it's like, I don't know. I don't know what the hell I'm talking about.
For one thing, people should always Google what I'm trying to tell you about TTRPG games, because while I have been playing since I was 8 years old, I truly never know any of the words unless I'm actually playing and looking at things.
Google is such a tool, too. It's like, why do I have to Google and prove to you that I'm right? That looks shittier than... Sorry, I'm not sure. Leap out if I can't.
No, you can curse. We're a podcast about misogyny. We just get angry and we curse.
We have to curse. Why do I have to, Google it and tell you that you're wrong and be the actually person in this scenario instead of you believing me or you Googling it and finding out that you're wrong quietly and being like, oh, I was wrong. It's like, no, now I'm going to call you out and be like, you were wrong because you didn't do it yourself.
Also, it is your responsibility to fact check yourself because, as you've already stated, it's not always a safe environment for me to fact check myself. I could be the person that embarrasses you in front of all of your friends, and I have been because I'm petty. But I do that, like, logically knowing, like, hope he doesn't beat me to my car or something like that, where it's like, I'll go home and I'll reflect on that. I'll be like, great job, Danley. You forgot all of your everyday misogyny training and you once again put yourself in bodily harm because you were like, you really want to believe you're right, and now I'm going to embarrass you in front of all of your friends, your children, and your family. So, like, let's do it.
Yeah. And to the question of like, well, why didn't I and why isn't it safe? And it's just a matter of like, I can't have that conversation that I had with Alex in a meeting. I can't do that at work. You know, you're being combative, you're being emotional, you're being aggressive, you know, instead of assertive. The amount of, you know, things that we do that men can do and get like a positive, you know, they're being assertive, they're asserting themselves. And it's like, oh, well, you're being aggressive when you're demanding the same thing that a man demands. We get, and I, you know, talked to him about that of like, the reason that it upsets me and the reason that I can only, you know, have this conversation with you is it's not something I can have in other conversations in my work environment, that it's extremely not safe for me to do that, because who knows what that employee will, who that person will go to and how that impacts my future. You know, we're already up against enough with things to not even bring gender into it.
Right. Well, and also there, for me, it's men have the privilege of so much downtime and leisure time where we still have to be on our guard and defensive. Like, you deserve a game night away from your office, away from that pressure of proving yourself, being told that you, like, understanding that you know things, all of it. You deserve a break. And literally, one of my vision board goals for 2024, and this is why I chose quality as my word of the year, is because I'm tired of explaining to friends that I deserve spaces where I feel safe and safe with 100% of the people who are in the group or surrounding me. So I deserve for queer spaces to be safe for queer people. I deserve girls' days to be safe for me to be girly and glittery and pink and all of it. I deserve to go to the Barbie movie and not have someone's boyfriend throwing a fit because Ken did something wrong. And
oh God.
because Ryan Gosling won an. Did you see Ryan Gosling's face when he was like, yep. Why did I win? I'm not going up there.
Like, did you watch the movie? Like,
right?
Why? There were so many amazing songs for that film.
Honestly,
by
women. Honestly, what I should have done, and I did not think of doing this until the eve of me recording live our Misogynist of the Year ceremony that you can find the video of on Patreon, where I wrote a musical number about misogyny, a monologue speech, and like speeches all about these men and these misogynists. Is what I should have done, and what I will employ in 2024 is we will also have an ally of the year.
I actually pulled this article up, speaking of just like, you know, in this gaming industry, what can men do to help us, like, or how to impact this industry is like, we need them to, you know, say the things we're trying to say, in a sense that it's like, don't repeat what I say and get credit for it, but like call back out to somebody's point, or call back out, oh, Whitney didn't finish, or, you know, move so that we can have a seat at the table, like literally vacate the space so that we can sit there. Because if you don't vacate, you know, it's a conversation we have a ton, is like, how do we have women and marginalized people, you know, and higher as you go up the corporate ladder. And it's like, well, if you don't have a spot for them because they're all filled by men, they never will be able to sit there. So Summer Games Fest is kind of, you know, the replacement of E3. Rest in peace. I'm not that sad about E3 dying, but there was a, you know, kind of video game showcase about all these new games coming out, and not a single woman was on stage. The entire stage was men for 2 hours. They didn't have one personality come up, even though there were games made by women, characters that were people of color. You couldn't have, you know, you couldn't come up and say, you know, Nicolas Cage was there instead of a woman working on Dead by Daylight. You know, it's just such a reality like kick in the face that in 2023 a video game showcase didn't have one woman on stage. And it's like all the progress we've made just kind of feels like, well, shit. Not one person thought about this.
And in 2024, there's truly no excuse because everyone is going to come for you. Like, people are going to screenshot the sea of white men on a stage and be like, excuse me, where's even anyone? Just, you could have pulled anyone from the auditorium to be like, hey, we're going to need to like pad this picture. Come on. And you were just like, nope, this is fine. Everything's great.
100%. Now, the Video Games Awards that this man hosted, that hosted Summer Games Fest, definitely had women. But like, that's the thing, is like they had women previously. It's just like, no, it's not only on the presenter, the devs and the studios that are, having someone go and represent also need to be cognizant of like, is this the best person to represent? Yeah, it might be that the game director needs to go, and the game director is a man. But like, is there anyone else that you can send to talk about audio? Really, why didn't you sit there and say, hey, no one brought a woman? Like, is this an issue? And they definitely, when you see the Video Game Awards months later and you see women, it's like, is this just performative at this point too? Because did you just, I don't want there to be performative. I talk about that a lot in my line of work of like, I don't want to do performative marketing and like work with a female content creator. It's just kind of like, well, can we have more women, work on this campaign? And I said, what's your gender demographics for the video game? If it's 93% men, there's not going to be women to work on content creators on the game. Like, and we're not putting a woman there just because you want it. That is not my goal. Like, you want the top 5 players of this game. Your gender demographics are heavily men because it's a toxic game. Then it's just like, okay, so if the 7% are women, that's drastically going to decrease when it comes to a content creator even more. And it's like, I've had to have those conversations of, I don't want performative action. I want to do it where it makes sense. And unfortunately, I do have to make the decision sometimes of like, we're not going to have a woman on here. We're not going to, just reach out to people of color just because they're underrepresented. Look at your game. Why is your game underrepresenting those people? Is it because it's a toxic community that allows people to be harassed in lobbies? Like, look at that and fix that first, and maybe the creator space will change.
The fact that that's still like mental labor that you and I consider every day in every move in our careers and our work that we do, and they just sit in a room looking at people who it's that scene in the Barbie movie where it's Will Ferrell and all of his other white guy friends in suits, and Barbie's like, where are the women on your team? And Will Ferrell's like, I love women and I don't know what you're implying. And I was like, Will Ferrell gets it though, because I have heard that. Like, he delivered that line as a man who knows that that's been said to someone.
100%. He's heard that line personally from someone else that he's worked with.
If I could convince anyone of anything, it's the white people in the room who are the first line of defense to make sure that people of color are represented in the game. It is the men in the room, and you are the first line of defense, because by the time it gets to me to do it, I'm arguing with you. Like, you're defensive because you feel like you did something perfectly, and I'm coming in to be like, did you consider that while you were in this part of the globe in your game that there would be like people of mixed races there? And you're like, what? No. Why would I have to? And it's like, cool. So now I'm a threat to you. I can't make anything better if you're constantly viewing me as a threat. So it's exhausting. And that's why you deserve to break from it. To just go and play games.
Or just like it's an attack. There are times where I really want to work on like making sure that marketing is, not just inclusive but anti-racist, but that is then a burden on us to do. It's extra work for us to do. And there are definitely companies that have, back to accessibility, be every game company. Stardew Valley, I think, is made by one person, less the person that made that. That's so much work, but when you get into larger corporations, it's almost like you really don't have an excuse. And you have accessibility teams, and you have diversity and inclusion teams. What do your diversity and inclusion teams look like? I really hope you have people of color on there, and I really hope that you have, people that are also taking their, that blank bias. And my brain is blanking. It starts with a C. Cognitive bias, is that the, just the training where, we're just like conditioned to think a certain way, and we never stop and check of like, well, why do I feel that way? We do these trainings, allyship trainings and all that stuff, but it still always comes back to us to like double check that work and do the work. And it gets exhausting. There's times where I have to step away and say, just for my mental health, like I can't put in 120% for this right now. I can't, work harder on this when it's not being compensated. And that's hard because is someone filling that spot that we're leaving when we step away, but it's got to be exhausting. It's a lot of extra work that we have to take on that other people aren't thinking about.
It gets exhausting too, because my work as a woman who cares about inclusivity, your work as a woman who cares about inclusivity, that means if we are wrong, or we got our percentages off, or we said the wrong thing because we got into, a groove and we jump. Like, I would never remember what video game company made what game, because I have
there's
other
so
things.
many.
Because there's so many.
Yeah,
and
there's so many.
We never have the privilege to just be like, well, my job is this, and therefore I am the expert in this. It's always like, well, how did you not know that? How did you drop the ball on that? I, number one, can't work my job and do it effectively if I have to spend 20 to 45% of my energy explaining to you why my work matters, why I'm good at my work, why I'm not going to do something performative to make you feel comfortable and to make sure that you don't get blown up on Twitter for being a bad person. All of it. Because if I was a woman influencer in gaming and I was handed some like game where it's tits up, tube tops, ladies getting like made out with on cars or whatever, like just all of the misogynist trash that you could think of that you would never want to see in a game. And you're like, hey, could you play this live on Twitch and we'll throw you some money? I can't promise I'm not going to run my mouth about like, well, this is gross. Why are these my only like outfit options? And it puts me in a weird place of pressure to back that up because you knew that you were doing something wrong in the beginning of it. Let's go ahead and I'll move us into the concluding act of the show where we move forward in some positivity and we talk about my biggest lesson from the conversation, your biggest lesson from the person who had to live through this story, and then we'll manifest for a better future. So, would you like to deliver your life lesson first, or would you like me to deliver my life lesson?
I would love to hear yours first, if you don't mind.
When I think about your story, the greatest part about your story and your story ending up on this show is I am a fire and brimstone type of bitch. So it's a 3 strikes you're out kind of situation with me, and I will continue to be in the same room with you if I have to be, but also pretend like you're a ghost, and not like a fun ghost I'm trying to contact, like literally like I cannot see you, I cannot hear you, my body will not flinch if you're in the room. And I think the greatest part of your story is eventually he got to the right solution. And sometimes my heart could get a little bit more open because that's more hope-based instead of my insane after the holidays conspiracy theory brain where I'm like, well, let me tell you how that was all just plotted against us from the start. So I think that's the greatest part of your story. And if should you send it to him, should he ever stumble upon it, I will give him his flowers for coming to the correct solution.
Yeah, I think that's also my biggest takeaway was I really did have to put myself into a vulnerable spot, and I may have typically avoided it, and just gone along and played the niceties and been civil. I wouldn't have been fire and brimstone, but would be very annoyed and not give an opportunity and never second guess thinking about this person. Had I not been encouraged to talk to him, but just, felt that I could and stood up for myself. And it's a reminder that sometimes it's not safe to stand up for ourselves, but in a situation where it is, it's okay to do it, even if it's scary, even if it's, again, assess your situation and make sure you're safe. And doing it because maybe someone else in the room needed to hear what I had to say as well. There's this part of me while I'm having this conversation just thinking about his girlfriend. And she's a wonderful person as well. And, it's not that she's letting me talk to her partner that way, but she's giving me the space to talk to her partner that way, probably recognizing that I need to say this. And that he did learn from it, I think, and he did understand, and that he, like you said, got to that space and we can give him his flowers. Not all men are going to be deserving of the flowers, but when we can find them and we can have those conversations, we can hope to get them on our side and be advocates for us as well, because there definitely are men out there that will, take their seat. I think of it as the white woman. I'm a white person, so I am never going to take a seat away from a person of color. But if I see, this happened to me at a train station, to see a black woman being approached by a cop, I'm not leaving. I'm going to stand right there the entire time and tell you that she did exactly what she needed to do to exit the train station, and that you don't need to be coming at her like that, because I did the same thing as well, and you're talking to her only. We want to hopefully get there where men can do that for us, and that they can point out, hey, you spoke over her, or hey, you're literally just saying the same thing that she said. We need to make sure that credit is given where credit is due. And if I get thanked for a project I didn't work on, I'm going to give credit, and that I want men to do that as well. So we not need to give them the opportunities for that, because that's just but have those conversations where they're safe when they're difficult, because you may be surprised by how it goes.
Yeah. I mean, and I think that's important too, where it's hey, you might not be the person who built the gate and then chose to keep it. You might not be the gatekeeper, but if you are a person who walked through that gate and then realized that they were taking a really long time to check out my bag before I could get through the gate, it should give you pause. I think that's my manifestation, is that people start actually noticing those things. People actually start, and I call it everyday activism, or local activism, because so often we're, number one, it's because the world is a shit show and on fire, but globally we're not great. And I think we find comfort in well, the world's a mess, but thank God my community is a really great, I got myself in a really great community. Yes, and yes, and in order for things to change globally, they have to change locally. And it all starts with people going, did you consider making part of the cast African American? Did you consider that because we're in the southwestern part of the nation for the story, that some of the people that our main characters would be interacting with would be of Hispanic descent? Did you consider that? Because to me, that's just logic. And then, because it won't become safe to do that until it's a majority of us doing it and not just me at a bar.
100%. Yeah, that's a manifestation of making sure that my team is safe. My team works hard, how can we expand that to other teams at my company that I work for? I know that my team is going to give the space, and how can we make sure that other teams, let's take it and spread it out further so it can grow internally and then hopefully across the industry as well.
Do you have a manifestation that you would like to share, or was it kind of looped into your lesson?
I think looped into the lesson of just like to take those, to I'm a very emotional person, and it's hard to not have difficult conversations without emotions, but to have those conversations and to share those of like where I'm angry, where something's affecting me, instead of pushing it down and being like, well, it causes too many rifts or ripples, and I don't want to make any waves. It's okay to make waves, and how that is shared is, it's okay to be vulnerable sometimes to, hopefully make some change.
Because honestly, we're having fear responses because there's a power imbalance in our conversation, and we are very aware of that. Is there something that you would like to plug for the end of the show?
Sure. Yeah. Speaking about horror, I did this for 2023 movie challenge called the Oh My Horror Movie Challenge, where every week you watch a horror movie based on a theme that I pick. So 52 weeks, 52 themes, 52 horror movies. I always start the year off with body horror because it's new year, new you, literally sometimes. But then there's, it's a really great way to, I think, get movies off your watch list, or if you're just thinking of what to watch, it'll be anything from genre horror to decades to directed by Black directors or women in horror directors to really funny themes like puppet horror and sweaty horror, where people are just like really sweaty in the movie. Daddy horror, mommy horror, horror in the woods. There's a ton of themes, and it's really fun. And so you can check that out at ohmyhorror.com. And each week comes with a letterbox list. So you see the theme, and if you want to get some ideas or just like want to go through my letterbox list I created, it's all linked on the site. And if you want to join in, there's a place on the site where you can share your letterbox list, and you can see what other people participating are watching, and get some ideas, and just kind of watch along. And I love seeing what people are watching for the week. So yeah, check it out at ohmyhorror.com.
I love it. It's a really great activity to be doing while we're still in this weird limbo linear space of still being affected by all of the writers and actors strikes. And I've run out of scripted things to watch because, and now I'm just watching The Real Housewives of Potomac. So,
I mean, I've been binging Hoarders while I'm like in the process of moving. It's really helped me throw some things away, and just I don't know what that says about me, but
I love
that's been my comfort show of late.
Oh my god, I love that. Hoarders as a comfort show. I traded all of TLC as a comfort channel when
terrible
TLC was up and happening. Tolerators, you know the drill. It's been I've Tolerated Pod on Instagram. You're going to want to follow us on To All the Men I've Tolerated Before on YouTube and Patreon. On that Patreon, even if you're not paying a monthly fee, there is free bonus content. And some of that stuff, like the announcement of who won Misogynist of the Year, is for free on Patreon, and I'm not putting it anywhere else. You're going to have to use context clues when I talk about it in TikToks and things. And I'm Natalie K124 on TikTok and on Instagram too. Feel free to always DM me Misogynist of the Year nominees, maybe Ally of the Year nominees, so I remember that I want to do that, and your own stories of everyday misogyny. Whitney, thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so glad we finally got around to doing this, and I cannot wait to check out your stuff on Patreon.
Thank you. And remember, tolerators, you don't have to smile through anything you're tolerating, including knowing you deserve an apology and just waiting around to get it. Smiles are for joy.